vampire who never knew what life was until it ran out in a red gush over your lips. I can't stand this any longer.
You made us what we are, didn't you?
God kills indiscriminately, and so shall we.
You like dying? You condemn me to hell!
Monster. One happy family.
He turned we end her suffering and yours! For do not doubt, you are a killer!
I want some more.
Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Stephen Ray, Antonio Banderas, Kirsten Dunst, and Christian Slater. Interview with the Vampire.
Hey YouTubers, Hankster here, and welcome to another movie review. And today's horror movie that we're going to focus on for the month of October is Interview with a Vampire, starring Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Kristen Dunst, Antonio Banderas, Stephen Ray, and Christian Slater. Now, of course, this is the movie based on the original vampire novel, Interview with a Vampire, done by Anne Rice, which, of course, started off the now known as the Vampire Chronicles. And, of course, so far it's only had one sequel after 8 years, but we'll get to that movie in a future video. This, of course, tells the tale of Louis, at Louis' point of view, about his encounter with a vampire known as Lestat, played by Tom Cruise. And, of course, after being made a vampire, he, of course, has an adventure of many lifetimes through multiple countries, from the banks of the Mississippi in Louisiana, New Orleans, to Paris, France, where most of the story comes to a head. Of course, tells not just the origins of Louis, but of course his vampire daughter Claudia, and their encounters with not just Lestat but other vampires, including Antonio Banderas' character Armand. Now, I have to say this is of course pretty much different than most other vampire movies. Of course, taking a lot of risky moves, having more of a trying to blend in the homosexual tones of the book into the movie. But of course, they're kind of overshadowed by the adventure aspects with the vampires and all. Of course, there's some facts you might not remember from the movie. Christian Slater's role as the interviewer was originally supposed to be played by River Phoenix, but during an early part of the production, River Phoenix died of a drug overdose at the Viper Room in Los Angeles around that time, so they had to call in Christian Slater, which is kind of ironic because Christian Slater, of course, starred with Winona Ryder in the movie Heathers, and of course Winona Ryder would star in another vampire movie, which of course was Bram Stoker's Dracula. So it's a little bit of a parallel, between the two movies that. Even though neither of them starred in a vampire movie together, they of course would later star in vampire movies later on. Even this of course was Kirsten Dunst's very first movie. If you might recognize her from anything else, she of course starred in all 3 Spider-Man movies as Mary Jane. Antonio Banderas, of course, would later star in such movies as the Zorro movies, and of course played the voice of Puss in Boots in the Shrek movies. The movie was, of course, directed by the same guy who earlier did the transgendered movie The Crying Game, about a guy who falls in love with a transgendered person. Never really saw that movie, so. And of course, another interesting note, most people might not know that Tom Cruise was not the original choice by Anne Rice, the writer of both the book, and she of course also did the screenplay for the movie. But when she saw him his performance in the movie, she of course instantly changed her mind. Now, being, of course, I'm not a big fan of Tom Cruise. Most of his movies has pretty much before this was pretty much penned him as a show-off, and of course, being a vampire show-off like Lestat was a perfect role for him. Now, of course, since then he, of course, has kind of done more leadership roles. So this was sort of a turning point for Tom Cruise, his career. Brad Pitt is, of course, one of the movies that helped launch his career in the early 90s. This came out around 1994, by the way. So you get to see a lot of big-name stars in this movie get their start, pretty much, playing these characters. As you might remember from my Underworld Awakenings movie earlier this year. Of course, Stephen Ray, of course, co-starred in that movie as well. In Interview with the Vampire, he, of course, plays the vampire Santiago, who, of course, has a quarrel with Louis after their first meeting. And, of course, he would later be in Underworld as a Lycan. So that's an interesting twist to see him in another vampire movie. Of course, there's not no difference here. It's happened before. I'll probably do a review on another vampire movie that features vampire movie veterans playing sort of opposite roles than what they were originally played in the original vampire movies they were in. But it's not a really bad movie. Kind of, oddly enough, it also reminds me a little bit of 2.5 Men. You got Lestat, who is all in all sort of a ladies' man, even though he kind of goes a step further and kills the ladies, but he's sort of the Charlie Harper of the bunch. And then you got Louis, who's sort of the self-righteous, wussy, passive-aggressive guy, kind of like Alan Harper on the series. And, of course, you got Claudia, who's sort of like Jake, who pretty much likes to eat all the time, you know, in a vampire sense. So, even though she's not stupid, but, you know, I just recently made that discovery the other day. I was like, oh my God, this is almost like 2.5 Men. You know, I call it you can kind of call this 2.5 Vampires. But it's not a bad movie. The soundtrack's pretty good. Of course, features a really cool cover tune of the classic Rolling Stones hit Sympathy for the Devil, done by Guns N' Roses. This is, of course, a couple years before Guns N' Roses broke up. But not a bad song. The soundtrack itself is really good. So we really get a chance to... I used to have the soundtrack, so it's a pretty good collectible. And this was sort of part of the vampire craze of the 1990s. Like today, we have zombie movies going out the wazoo, getting some hype here and there. It was basically the same thing 20 years ago when it came to vampire movies. There was like a vampire movie coming out almost all the time. Interview with the Vampire, Bram Stoker's Dracula, From Dusk Till Dawn, and also this was pretty much one of the big movies of 1994. Even got some Oscar nominations. So, but oddly enough, it would take another 8 years for its sequel, Queen of the Damned, to be out in theaters. But that'll be our next movie review, horror movie review for October. And I hope you enjoyed this little review of Interview with the Vampire, and hope you catch it out on DVD or Blu-ray. It is also on Blu-ray. I noticed that too. And stay tuned here for more reviews, whatnot, and vampires here on the Multiverse. See ya.